calculated thing to come down the stairs while someone's sleeping and go in their room and kill them.
Tell me exactly what happened. I just got in from church and I think my wife is dead.
It was personal and repeated blows.
It appeared one of the primary objects that he attacked her with was a statue of Buddha.
I can only imagine what was going through her head because she was alive.
He went through great lengths to make sure that there was no blood.
Are you sure she's beyond help, sir?
The 911 call was very calm. He set up his alibi right away.
He's a psychopathic narcissist to me.
You didn't have a right to take her life. I hope that this haunts you until your last miserable day.
There was what we called an army.
Honestly, I wish that Meryl had the death penalty.
I miss her so much.
Love is not just an emotion, right? It's a choice that you make every single day to care for a person and be there for them and be in this with them.
She's not breathing.
Lauren Charles, a daughter, stepmother, and a friend who was found brutally murdered inside of her North Kensington home on a Sunday morning in March of 2021. The bedroom she was found in completely destroyed. Was it a robbery or a crime of passion?
There was a lot of hate in that crime scene. A lot of anger, a lot of hate.
This was a savage killing. The forensics and the crime scene seem to suggest she may have actually even been asleep when the beating began.
Everything in the house looks completely normal. The bedroom is completely just destroyed. The dresser drawers were pulled from the dresser and just completely dumped upside down and stacked on top of each other. The bed was actually lifted and put on its side up against the wall with blood, smeared on the bottom of the bed. Blood was everywhere. It was on the back of the door. It was all along the walls. You can see, bloody handprints all over the carpet, in the bathroom.
Lauren Charles died at the hands of who those closest to her call a monster.
It appeared one of the primary objects that he attacked her with was a statue of Buddha. She was beaten about the head, trauma, broken nose, eye sockets, broken ribs, savage beating. And then ultimately she was suffocated by him by taking a pillowcase and shoving it down her throat. This was a brutal killing.
That brutal killing ending the bright life of a 40-year-old woman who loved ones say brought people together.
She never seemed to fear anything.
She was so good at loving everyone she encountered.
She was the smartest person I've ever known, bravest person I've ever known.
She was amazing. Bubbly, go-getter. She knew exactly what she wanted. And the love that she had for people.
Lauren grew up in New Orleans.
Lauren and I met in high school. The story goes that she didn't particularly care for me at the time. I had a lot of energy and was kind of all over the place.
From there, she went on to Johns Hopkins, where she studied public health and sociology.
We were basically together if not every weekend, at least 4 or 5 days a week, where we just talk, go out to lunch, go shopping together. We did basically almost everything together.
From there, Lauren went to school in New York and eventually law school in Oregon before arriving in D.C.
Lauren and I met at the DOJ. We were both contractors there. She was my best friend. She was my maid of honor.
Love is not just an emotion, right? It's a choice that you make every single day.
Lauren's community spanned across the country. It was strong, but friends say she wanted to build a family. She met her future husband, Reginald Dunlap Jr., or Reggie as she called him, in 2016. The two met online.
She was very excited when they met. She called me after their first date. Lauren was very brave about everything in life, including love. She really had this optimistic outlook that she should keep putting herself out there until she found the right guy. And he charmed her.
I think that he promised Lauren everything that she wanted.
I didn't think they were going to last just because I know who Lauren was, and she is that outgoing person, very hospitable, always has her door open to people.
I met him at a Japanese garden festival in Southeast DC. She asked me afterwards when we were alone, what did I think of a boyfriend? And my response was I need another first impression because this one did not work for me.
Many of her friends said similar things, that Reggie was quiet.
He did not have too much personality.
We'd invite her out to, anything, cookouts, whatever. Sometimes he'd come, sometimes he wouldn't. He didn't talk much.
Friends say there were other red flags.
He was living with his mom, but Lauren couldn't meet her. She couldn't come to his house ever. He would only come to hers. The status of his job was always in flux, always not clear.
The address that he had given her, she went to visit him as a surprise, only to find out that there was nothing at that address. I think it was a vacant lot. And it was like a slap in the face.
I remember early on, a couple of us being like, oh, Lauren could do so much better, but we want her to be happy. So if she's happy, we'll support this.
When Lauren and Reggie decided to get married, Lauren's dad, John, tried to step in.
I have a brother in Fairfax. Well, he was living in Fairfax at the time, and I asked him to speak with her. I thought that coming from me, it would not be received the same way. I did not like the idea that she was marrying him. And his assessment was she pretty much knows what she's doing.
And so the two got married in 2019, but even the wedding seemed a bit off to Lauren's friends.
My husband threw him his bachelor party because there was no one else at the wedding for him, and the only people that attended were Lauren's male friends or like her female friends' husbands.
When they were saying their vows, I pledged to allow her to make her decision and not interject my opinion. So I stayed out of it from that regard.
Still ahead, the 911 call made from inside of the Montgomery County home, plus the device found at the crime scene that became the focal point of the case. Lauren Charles and Reggie Dunlap met in 2016. They got married in 2019. Lauren's friends and family had reservations about the relationship, but it wasn't until 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, that Lauren realized she needed a change.
He was a leech, basically is the best way to describe him, who was using Lauren, who he was married to, as his meal ticket for basically everything.
He was telling her her friends made him uncomfortable. Her friends weren't nice to her. I mean, he was isolating her. Him telling her that he was the only way she could have a kid. He was gaslighting her. All of that is abuse.
So she would tell me that she'd have to go out to her car to have to talk to her friends or have to leave the house to talk to her friends because he would use whatever she said on the phone against her.
He would go around the house, take pictures of their wedding, photos from their wedding, and put them up around the house. She would take them down and he would put them back up in her own bedroom. As part of this manipulation and this controlling behavior.
Look, this woman began sleeping with a knife in her bedroom because she feared her husband. At another point in time, she actually went out and bought mace to have in her bedroom. All of these things were done because she had fears.
In October of 2020, she sent me a text message and said, I'm going to be leaving him. He's been cheating on me and this is not the first time. And that's when I knew that there was a lot more going on behind the scenes that I didn't realize.
She had finally started to share some things with me because some of her friends were taking it upon themselves to do their own investigations and background checks.
I was like, I'm going to do a background check. And then that revealed other things about his life. Like he had 2 children he had not told her about.
So he was told by her that he had to be out of the house by the end of March. So time was running out.
Her understanding was that she couldn't get him out because of the moratorium on evictions, and she was hesitant about seeking a protective order.
He would tell people that we're not going to get divorced. We're going to work these things out. He was spreading false information, trying to control her.
Then on March 7th, 2021, Lauren was killed inside her bedroom.
They were sleeping in separate bedrooms, so he says he went to bed so he hadn't seen her. And then when he woke up in the morning, he got up and walked the dogs, ate breakfast, said that he went to church, did not attempt to speak to Mrs. Charles at all, and that when he returned, he found her in her bedroom deceased.
That's when Reggie called 911.
The 911 call was very calm. He set up his alibi right away. He gives his name, the address.
I just got in from church and I think my wife is dead.
Okay. And what makes you think that, sir?
Because she's not breathing.
Okay. Is she cold?
She's like, yeah.
Okay.
Police respond to the call.
They arrived, not priority, not lights and sirens, because they didn't understand the gravity of the situation because of the 911 call.
His description of it really underplayed it and seemed to be inconsistent with somebody who would actually come upon the scene that he came upon. Now, having said that, did he pretend to cry and weep and put his hands in his face? Yeah, he did that for a long period of time.
A bottle of bleach was dumped on her body to try to, cover any DNA or anything. I don't know. I guess I'm assuming he's trying to cover DNA or prints or something. I don't know what he was trying to do. But that clearly came from the laundry room downstairs.
There are her handprints on the door on her way out, and she ultimately dies right at the foot of her door to her bedroom as she's trying to escape her murderer. And then afterwards, he took the time to fake a burglary, ransacked the room, pulled out all the drawers.
Reggie beat Lauren with a statue of Buddha, then suffocated her.
The pillowcase may have suggested that maybe the blows didn't kill her. Maybe there was some agonal breathing. Maybe there was some signs that she was still alive, and he wanted to make sure he finished the job.
When you walked in that house, it reeked of bleach. You felt like you were in a swimming pool, or worse. It was a horrible, horrible stench of bleach. And for him to claim that he came in, went and changed his clothes, nothing's wrong, everything's good, and goes down into the kitchen and eats a cookie, and there is a half-eaten cookie on the counter in the kitchen, that is cold-blooded.
I can only imagine what was going through her head, because she was alive. You could tell she was alive because of just the way the crime scene was. She was on her bed, but then her fingerprints were on the wall, so she was trying to get away.
Investigators arrest Dunlap that day for murder, but when they return to the scene, they make a discovery that unravels the entire case.
He disabled her Apple Watch so that it could no longer record at some point in time during the killing. He destroyed her watch. He actually turned his own app devices off, and between about 2 o'clock in the morning and 11 o'clock the next morning, his devices were dead and silent and turned back on the next morning.
Still ahead, another secret. The information Lauren learned before her death that helped investigators, including a near-fatal interaction decades earlier.
Because I dated Reginald Dunlap Jr. and he tried to kill me.
A Calm 911 call, an Apple Watch, and cell phone data. All things investigators say led them to Reggie Dunlap for the murder of his wife, Lauren Charles. But the evidence doesn't end there.
There were 2 women that he was involved with while he was married to Miss Charles.
One of the mistresses had shared some texts with me that he was demanding her her debit card numbers, passcodes to her social media accounts and things.
And there had been potential people in the past who had thought protective orders against him. And the fact that he had assaulted a young woman at Howard University years before this.
That young woman at Howard University is Nikki Peel. We spoke to her about that night 20 years ago.
He seemed like a fun guy, if not particularly mature. He did seem like he was someone that was charismatic.
They had dated for a year and a half, off and on.
And we were in bed, and I asked him to close the window. And I asked him probably about 3 or 4 times. I'm like, it's cold, can you please close the window? And then out of nowhere, he just turned over, jumped on me, and he took the pillow and he proceeded to smother me with the pillow. And then he took his hands and he put them around my throat and he just squeezed with all his might. And I remember then I could see his eyes. At first he looked angry, but then he just went blank. And I was truly terrified. And I just think I must have sent up a prayer to God or something. And I just, with the last little bit of energy I had, I fought him off. And, he released me.
Nikki says she thinks he only let her go because her roommate was in the room next door. She says she chose not to report it to police because of the shame she felt afterwards. 20 years later, and 2 years after the murder of his wife, 45-year-old Reginald Dunlap Jr. was convicted in Lauren Charles' brutal death. Nikki wrote a victim impact statement for Dunlap's sentencing.
Although it was over 20 years ago, Reggie was a liar, a cheater, and a gaslighter even then. I realize now how lucky I am to be alive. Unfortunately, and so very tragically, her kindness to this dangerous man who did not deserve her took Miss Charles away from her family, friends, and colleagues who loved her so much.
Dunlap was sentenced to life in prison with all but 55 years suspended. He won't have a chance to get out until he's nearly 100 years old. We reached out to Reggie Dunlap's lawyers. They tell Fox 5 neither Dunlap or his legal team were available to interview. They tell us he maintains his innocence and disagrees with the jury's decision. At his sentencing, Dunlap spoke.
He said that he continued to love the family and that he wished that he had known all the things that Lauren was saying to them, because he would have liked to have told his side of the story as to what was happening with their marriage and had them understand that they were still, trying to work out their marriage, which had everyone shocked that he would continue, even in his sentencing, to try to manipulate everybody into believing that he's the victim in this.
Family and friends showed up in full force for the trial, more than 24 people.
The gallery was filled.
They said at the trial that they've never had so many witnesses, that they've had to fly in from all over the country because that was Lauren's community.
I wanted to jump over everybody, and I knew the bailiff would have taken me out of there, so I wanted to jump over everybody and just attack him. I did. The anger, I didn't realize I had it in me until I saw him.
When the verdict was read, I got up and walked out of the courtroom. And when I was outside in the lobby, I just stood up there. There was no elation.
Lauren's family and friends hope her story can help others who might find themselves in a similar situation.
The attacks were gruesome. The pictures were awful. They are staying in my memory forever. But I do absolutely hate the fact that she died alone in terror. Nobody deserves that. Abuse does not always begin with physical attacks. So if you are in a relationship and you're being controlled and manipulated and gaslighted, that to you should be more than a disappointment. It should be a red flag that something is really wrong and that you should act now to make a plan for yourself to exit that relationship, because it can cost you your life.
Abuse doesn't always look like physical violence. I think a lot of women and people who are friends of people who are experiencing those type of relationships don't realize that that's abuse and that it is a big warning sign.
Coming up, Lauren leaves behind a lasting legacy in the ways she's being remembered across the country. Lauren Charles was a beloved daughter and friend. Her memory will live on in the lives she touched.
Not having her physically present, I miss her so much.
She was just in our life, and there's just that piece missing. That we just try to fill with love and try to fill with just living life for her, in memory of her.
She linked up all of her people together and loved them all. She was really, really good at meeting people where they were.
She's the smartest person I've ever known, bravest person I've ever known. And we're going to honor her memory. We're all doing our own things. There's scholarship funds and donor-advised funds.
The University of Oregon's law school has set up a scholarship in her behalf, and there's a women's shelter that has rooms named after her in New Orleans. Lauren, I love you. I tell her that now. I still have her pinned on my iPhone message. So she is at the top